I do think, though, that the scenario that we were responding to incorrectly is not hard to imagine, which is why we all went down that road. And I believe it's actually already occurring in just more subtle ways. So I think that there are regulators in the US who are soft pedaling their actions against Elon because the US military needs Starlink in Ukraine, for example. I do think that is already occurring. There's a chill in the air around him that they cannot enforce the full power of the law against him already. And you can imagine these kind of scenarios playing out that because they're very logical extensions of what's happening already.
I disagree with that in the U.S. in that, like, Kamala Harris has said that, like, he has to suffer consequences. I forget, I can pull up the exact quote. This was way before, because they don't like the information that's on X in the U.S., but obviously they loved it under Jack Dorsey because it was supportive of their regime. I do think it's a more interesting question.
Emil, I really think that's a very reductive take on what it is. I really do. It's not that the Democrats liked it because it was supportive of their regime, which I love the word regime, by the way. I think they liked it because the guy running it was not a raging extremist in his views and was not letting on hate speech and anti-Semitism and all sorts of disgusting stuff.
Mark Zuckerberg wrote a letter to Congress saying he was being forced by the Biden administration to censor topics that were supportive of their policies. It doesn't get much more regime-y than that.
Yeah, the topics you're referring to are COVID vaccines.
And the Hunter Biden laptop, or whatever it was. I mean, look, I don't want to get rat hole in this point because I don't think it's that interesting. I think what's interesting with this Pavel thing in France also, the U.S. standards for free speech are different than they are elsewhere in the world. So how do U.S. companies... how do they behave? Or not even U.S. companies. Like in this case, Telegram's not a U.S. company. What are the rules to follow? You're like, okay, follow the local rules. And you're like, well, it's impossible to moderate 1 billion conversations. Well, like, okay, well, then you're illegal here, even though our citizens rely on it. So then what?
Here's my take. It's very subtle and nuanced, okay? By default, companies should follow the laws of the local country that they're in. However, a number of countries have unjust laws. And is it possible and maybe valuable or ultimate form of justice for internet companies, irrespective of where they're from, to sort of impose a meta law, a meta principle about free speech, and to kind of circumvent those laws to empower dissidents and empower social movements? I think so, to a degree. And I think that's what we talked about last episode with, Telegram serving ultimately a net good. But at the same time, when the people who own those companies are showing a carelessness, a callousness, or a hypocrisy about those principles, people question the motives and motivations of, well, yeah, free speech is good, but you are also banning people and acting kind of petulantly and putting your thumb on the scale for what is ostensibly supposed to be an open conversation on an open platform. And so these things like trump each other. It's like the laws should be upheld unless and until the laws are unjust, in which case the internet culture is this great global infrastructure that can subvert authoritarian tendencies. But then that's subverted by, yes, but the people running them need to be believed to have great principles in and of themselves. And Musk breaks that third layer. And I think that's why people have less tolerance for his bullshit.
I think, Chris, like the argument you're trying to make is not tenable, right? Because what you're saying is in some way we want companies to decide what laws they will follow and what laws they won't follow, depending on whether we like them or not. And, I just think that...
I know.
It's not...
I know. It is...
like, that's not a thing.
No, I understand, but that you have to... There's a meta layer here, which is just because it's a law doesn't mean that it's moral or ethical, and that any country powered by a dictatorship can pass any bloody law they want. And so there is this kind of meta principles that American companies or the Western philosophy has around speech and due process and what have you, that yes, it's messy, and these are kind of super state actors or extra state actors. And yeah, that is a bloody messy situation, but that's the world we live in, that these tech CEOs are more powerful than nation states in many ways. And that sucks. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying in some cases we're willing to tolerate it for some kind of sense of higher level principles, I think. I think we would be more willing to tolerate it if it wasn't Elon Musk. That's what I'm saying.
Well, who's the we, right? Like even between the four of us, I don't think we get agreement on that statement. And that is the point.
Let me give you an example. I think we are more eager and willing to support the Telegram CEO because we don't know of his personality and politics than we are Elon Musk because we know some of the careless and hurtful things he's said and done. And so I think, last episode we were defending the Telegram CEO and we are not defending Elon Musk's Brazilian actions, right?
I think we fall into the bias of do we like the guy or not.
That's what I'm saying.
That's my point.
At the end of the day, this is a threat on democracy because like your leaders were elected by you and they call the shots. It's all a question of who calls the shots. If the government calls the shots, then it's a democracy. If somebody who is not elected...
Sorry, Amir, it's not if the government calls the shots, it's a democracy. If the people call the shots and they've elected a government and then the government... That's what I'm saying is that...
By reference, so there's like there's the European Switzerland direct calling the shots and there's the US representative of calling the shots. But like if you are opting in for democracy, you're saying the elected people are the top and they make the rules. And if that is not the case, and if they can't tell a company what to do, then that company is calling the shot. And that company has not been elected by people. So whether we like the person at the top of the company or we don't, if we choose a CEO, we choose a different government system.
So let me ask you, Amir, in Venezuela, where Maduro thinks Elon is his number one enemy, the number one reason he lost the election, is that something that like, oh yeah, Elon should have just like banned Twitter, just like Maduro wanted in Venezuela?
So my answer is, if I'm a true democracy person, is like, the answer is yes, they should do whatever the government is saying, and the people should choose a better government or revolt.
But they tried. The point was of X in Venezuela is they were trying.
So we're now going into like even a deeper rabbit hole of like,
no, but I'm trying to test your limits. You must have a limit where you're like, you know what, in that case, you're right. Like,
yeah,
okay, I can tell you my answer to that, Emil, is that I think to a certain extent, companies are in a position where they can take a stand, but they might also have to face the consequences, right? They might have executives arrested in that country for breaking the law in that country. That's just how it is, right? So yeah, all of this stuff is complex. And I think operating in countries where the political situation is suboptimal, or in the case of Venezuela, extremely suboptimal, has a lot of moral complexity to it. I agree with that. But ultimately, the law, it's there.
That's what I'm saying, is that there is a real complexity here, because Amir, you and I last episode were very clearly like saying Telegram is not moderating their conversations in France, and France as a democracy has decided to arrest the CEO, and we believe that that's overreach because this is a private communication platform.
But we both said it's okay to block Telegram in France. So I think governments could do that.
They can block it, yes, but that's what they're doing to X, right? The X has basically told them, get fucked, and so they're blocking it, and they're using whatever means they can.
I think that's okay.
It's
in both cases.
It's okay, but we're cheering on the CEO of Telegram, and we are...
I mean, I'm not.
We are equivocating. Well, you haven't...
And it's worse, Amir, because a judge in Brazil said, not only are we shutting down X, but I'm going to fine my own citizens $9,000 a day for evading that ban. I am not allowing them to choose what to hear.
Emil, I'm not siding with that government. I'm saying I come from a country where I disagree with the government for the last 16 years. But I still...
No, but you are siding with the government in the Brazil case if they're also punishing the citizens for they're not allowed to say, I want to hear this.
But if you ask a libertarian, both sides, both Democratic and Republican, are punishing citizens in the US by taking taxes. You can have a lot of opinions on government, but at the end of the day, both sides agree how the rules are played. You choose a government. If that government is shitty, you replace that government. And if you have a judge that is bad, the government should replace that judge. I'm saying it's okay if I agree or disagree with that judge. The process should be due process. Choose a good government. The government should choose good judges. If judges do bad jobs, they should fire them. That's how the game
Okay, they
is
should. But
played.
what if that doesn't happen? Are you judging whether the due process is due in Venezuela or not due in Brazil?
I think Amir's point is, and it's a very good one, which is, what if that doesn't happen? Well, the answer sort of has to be either tech execs get to override it because they've decided something they liked didn't happen, or they need to sit down and shut the fuck up and let the process run its course. You can't say, well, what if the thing didn't work out the way we liked? Well, our powers combined, we are tech execs, let's go override the outcome of the election. That's not okay.
Yeah, no, but X shut down. X is shut down in Brazil. They won. The judge won. He won.
If the people don't like that decision, and that decision is big enough of an impact to their life, they should choose a different party, and then that party should tell that judge that he is out of the job and revert their decision. That's how governments work. That's how it works in the U.S. That's how you would like it to work in the U.S.
So he's already reversing the VPN ban because the citizens are rebelling. And this is the same judge that shut down WhatsApp years ago until there were riots in the street and he had to put it back on.
That's exactly how democracy works.
It's kind of, when it happens that frequently, you wonder what is happening at the top of this government?
Oh, it's definitely broken.
They're so afraid of their own citizens,
It's
right.
I agree with you. I'm just saying from the process perspective, I don't want to break the process because democracy is a very, very important process. And if we break it by having CEOs choose what we just forfeit democracy. Even because we don't like the outcomes of some decisions, democracy is very, very important. And we should trust the system.
Yeah, it's clear that, with non-state actors like tech billionaires.
Can we stop calling billionaires? Like maybe, like you're trying to put a class thing into this.
Tech moguls, powerful tech moguls, with countries, democracies falling into populism and kind of into these weird gray areas. And with, debates about AI and free speech and so on, we're in a very complicated era. And this question of who trumps who, and Trump, it's a very complicated world that we're living in. And it's just to try to put a bow on this is ultimately it's lots of power centers pushing, and we have to hope that the middle holds, that all of these things balance each other out and it lands in a good spot.
I'll finish with one thought. When Trump got elected, Slack had 2 days of bereavement. So people were released from their day to grief about this.
Were they paid also?
Paid grief days. I thought that
that happened. That happened at Uber as well, Emil. I don't know if you remember, but the next day we didn't have grief days, but for the next week, people were like,
it's fine for people to be upset. Right? But finish your story.
I thought that was wrong, because even if I didn't agree with the decision that the people have voted for, I said companies should not have political opinions. They should adhere to to democracy. And it's very dangerous once you start threading that needle of I choose which side and then I act on which side. I really like democracy because I've seen other places where there's no democracy. It works and we should cherish it.